Welcome to the Bradford Island Restoration Advisory Board meeting for January 13th, 2026. And quick question, Megan, do you want me to read all the slides? Because it seems like I also have some staff slides that are in between.
Oh, no, we don't have to read all the slides. Typically, we just very briefly kind of go over these first few slides and then jump into agenda and opening the meeting.
You don't want me to read the computer tips then? Got it. Yeah, so the RAB mission, the mission of the Bradford Island NPL RAB is to establish and maintain a forum with all interested parties for the exchange of information in an open and interactive dialogue concerning the CERCLA response activities at the Bradford Island NPL site. And here's our agenda. So we've already done the welcome. Let's go ahead and do the roll call. And then we'll have the Restoration Advisory Board business, Army Corps of Engineers Bradford Island site updates with the Cascade Island overview. We'll have the calendar for upcoming RAB meetings, and then we'll engage in a RAB discussion in public open forum. And if there's no new business, we will adjourn. So roll call. I'm Asa Leckie, local government, and I am the interim county co-chair. Is Christy Baptiste Ike. Am I pronouncing that correct?
I didn't see her join.
Okay. Valerie Hoy. Carl Merkel. Kate Murphy.
Here.
Mitch Patton.
Here. And Carl, did you guys get the message that Carl was having some issues trying to get it, or maybe was wondering when the meeting was? Because I seen that pop up in one of my emails, but did anybody else see that?
I responded to him and sent all the links and instructions back out.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Jennifer Riddle.
Here.
Andrea Sumarao.
Here.
And is that all the current members? Did I miss anybody? And did I miss anybody that joined late? Okay, not hearing any. We'll move on to the next slide. Do we have any old business to discuss? Megan, do you know of any old business that needs to be hashed out?
I'll have one item. It's not really ready to talk about yet here, but we had received, USACE had received some comments via email. I believe it was from Valerie on the 2025 site management plan update. We've almost finished responding to those. I was just having someone finish the review today and we ran out of time. So since I wasn't able to get those out before the meeting, I'll send them after the meeting. And then if there's any kind of follow-up questions, we can talk about it at the next meeting. But I just wanted to let folks know that that will be coming back out to RAB members to take a look at. And then we'll have an opportunity to talk about that in March, and we'll include Valerie's questions as well as USACE's responses attached to the March meeting minutes after we talk about it.
All right.
And that's all my old business. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Under new business is approving the September 2025 RAB minutes. If everybody's had a chance to review them, the chair will entertain a motion.
Andrea makes a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Is there a second?
Kate can second.
All right. We have a first and second to approve the September 2025 RAB minutes. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
This is Mitch.
Yeah,
Hey,
go ahead.
I'm gonna abstain again from this, and I'm just wondering, is there any way that we can get these minutes out sooner rather than, 60 or 50 days later? I'm not sure how the minutes are, you guys actually create the minutes. Is it through an AI system or does somebody actually sit there and do it? But I'm thinking that because for me, I don't know how you guys work it, but I'm not gonna sit and watch the video again to review the minutes to make sure I'm remembering what happened. It would be a lot easier if I could get these things sooner to me. And then I could go, okay, yeah, I remember that. Yes, this sounds good, correct. But for now, I'm abstaining from it again.
Okay, and then for the other members, when there's an abstention from the vote, if it's a non-critical or a required set number item, that can lower the quorum count for passage. So if there's a require of 6 votes to pass and somebody abstains, that could lower the quorum for passage to 5, FYI. So, and I see another hand raised. Is that Kate?
Yeah, that's Kate. I
Yeah,
just
go
would,
ahead.
thank you. I just would second what Mitch requested, and I do believe that came up at a previous RAB meeting about getting the meeting out in a more timely fashion. So I just wanted to put my name behind that as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can respond to that from the core.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
So
ahead.
yeah, typically we have been able to get these out about 2 weeks to 30 days after the meeting goes out, and that's a feasible amount of time for us to put those out. This particular last meeting was not the meeting itself, I should say. The government shutdown was really the problem with the last one. We really didn't get proper notice from kind of high levels of the government that if a government shutdown went in place, that I wouldn't be able to communicate with the public. So once I found that out, we went through the process of trying to figure out if we were going to be authorized to hold this meeting or not. I basically was told, no, just don't, just completely minimize all interactions with the public. And so, we went ahead, we were, kept going ahead with doing the meeting minutes, but we were not able to get those out until after the shutdown was resolved.
Mitch has his hand up.
I think Kate had actually put her hand up before that.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you. I totally appreciate the issue with the shutdown. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about how the minutes are created, because I still think 30 days out, particularly if we ever moved to monthly meetings again, I think that's still a tough amount of time for people to retain everything that was discussed in the meeting, given that most of us have lots of meetings. So maybe there's a different method of getting those that we could look at to get those minutes distributed in a more timely fashion. Thank you.
The process is we start with a set of AI generated minutes. They are, I'll admit, or at least I'll say in my personal opinion, AI minutes are pretty rough to work with to develop a set of comprehensive and intelligible minutes from. So, but we start with that. Our contractor works to develop that into a set of draft minutes for the core. That typically takes between 1 to 2 weeks to put together, depending on how many other meetings they are supporting that week, since our facilitators also travel other places around the country to do other RABs, other public meetings. From there, on the core side, we take an additional 1 to 2 weeks, which includes review from the project manager as well as anyone else who is in attendance. And there's also a review from Public Affairs and Office of Counsel, which we have to do for any document that leaves the building.
Are edits made during that last part, like during the review process? Do edits get made to the notes?
Yeah, there'll be edits made.
And the nature of those edits are to make them more aligned with the transcript?
not necessarily like, that's kind of the problem. I think personally, I think the transcript can come up with like missed words. It can, hear words that rhyme and put the wrong word on, stuff like that. So it's like correcting things from the AI. It is shortening the discussions. If there's a discussion that's kind of extraneous, like we're asking people like, hey, can you hear me? Can you, am I coming through okay? Editing out that kind of stuff. There's quite a lot of edits that go into it.
Okay, but not editing content that's relevant, just.
No, we're not we're not removing relevant content or changing the nature of like what people say. We're actually trying to make sure that it actually does match what people say. So personally, I actually do go back to the, when I'm doing the minutes and making my own edits, I go back to the actual video to make sure that the context is being accurately reflected.
Yeah, that's what I refer to too. Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions, Kate?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mitch Patton, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I know I've read back through some things. It's been quite a few meetings back, but I know I've read through things. I'm going like that I have said, and I'm going like, I didn't say that. So I'm wondering too, like I think it's the city of Stevenson. I think I've noticed other council meetings that they just basically put up a YouTube video that couldn't we do that here? Just say, hey, there's this video and you want to see what's going on, you watch it rather than to write or read through some stuff that maybe isn't accurate. And that way there wouldn't be any modifications made to the meeting itself. There it is, boom.
Well,
We do
Mitch,
post the YouTube video.
Yeah, and this is Rich. Didn't you just say in the beginning of this that you don't have time to watch that whole video?
I don't.
But you're asking for them to post one so you can review it, even though you said that you don't have time to review it.
Rather than read through a piece of paper that is inaccurate, I would much rather spend my time watching a video that I could see. And then if I know was at the beginning of the meeting, towards the end of the meeting, it only sounds fair to me. I mean, that you can't alter that. You can't modify what was said in the meeting if the video was out there for everybody to see, because the stuff that's in this language, it's the fact, it's the definition of what that meeting said, what these minutes are saying, and I don't believe they're accurate.
Okay, so all I can say is, number one, we do have the YouTube videos put out. They are on the Army Corps of Engineers Portland District website. They're all there. They get put on the YouTube page and they get linked to the Bradford Island website. So they are available for people to look at anytime they want. And then secondly, in terms of reviewing the minutes, I mean, that is ultimately the responsibility of each and every single RAB member who's going to vote. If you're feeling like there is something misquoted, you need to let us know. I mean, I really don't know what else to say to that, unfortunately. And if you want to abstain for that reason, you can, it's your right. But I would, as the person who spends a lot of time on these minutes each and every time, I would definitely appreciate if there's errors, if everyone would take the time to let me know. So, thank you.
Yep. All right. You bet.
This is Rich. Here's what I suggest. Since this is the Teams meeting, there is the option to record and transcribe. Take the transcriptions, even though it is, even though it may pick up the wrong letters. The whole point of us reviewing it is that we can say, well, that's not what I said. I said here instead of fear or whatever. We can fix that. But the transcripts themselves, when you print them up, has people's names and has who did the talking, and and makes it very easy for you to look and say, okay, this is where I talked, this is where I talked, and this is where I talked, for those of us that are logged in online. And the only real issues then would be for those of us when are in the in-person meetings, whenever we're sitting in the room to look at that transcript. But that's my suggestion, is to just use the Microsoft Teams transcript option, and then couple that with the videos that Army Corps is already posting online, and it should be relatively easy to see what you said and see what was transcribed for what you said, and then make those adjustments.
Yeah, I think that would be not an issue to send out the transcript as well. I personally think the minutes are very helpful to make something more succinct, but I'm happy to send out the transcript if that's going to help folks review the minutes in a way that's easier for them.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and this is Asa. When I've needed a refresher, I've just looked at the videos on the Army Corps of Engineers YouTube channel, and yeah, and then one day I did go down the rabbit hole looking at how jetties are made. So that's a pretty interesting video too. So, all right. Is there any more issues or discussions? All right, we have a first and seconded. I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. That's Jennifer.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
So you're changing yours from abstain to opposed, Mitch, is that correct?
Or abstained, I mean, yep.
Okay, so, and then I'll call for the abstain, so one abstain.
Okay.
Anybody else abstain? All right, do the record keepers have a good consensus of the vote?
That should be Kelly or Lisa. Yeah, they've got it.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I think I hand this off now to Megan for the next slide.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to start going into the technical status update for everyone. I'm going to do my best to say all the acronyms and try to remind people what these things are that I'm talking about. But if at any point there is just a clarifying question about what something is, please feel free to raise your hand so you can ask that question. And from here, I will start with the Upland Operable Unit. So this is the east side of Bradford. We're currently conducting a supplemental remedial investigation to look into the nature and extent of the contamination and fate and transport of said contamination around that east side of Bradford Island. We have some upcoming work this month. We're going to be performing a second round of sampling on a few select wells. So that should be coming up really in the next week or so. And from there, we're just continuing to assess the data that we currently have for that investigation. We're also preparing for a non-time critical removal action. So this will be an early removal action where we'll be excavating different areas around the east side of Bradford Island. We awarded a contract in August 28th. I think we were able to announce that at our last meeting. And since then, we have kicked the contract off, developed our initial schedule with the contractor, and we've started working on a work plan. The work plan is going to detail exactly how we're performing those excavations, sampling the materials that come out, and all of that good stuff. So that's in development now. And the next step for that one will be handing it off to the regulators and tribes for their review. Next slide, please. Okay, so next area is the River Operable Unit, OU2. So this is the area that is, when we generally refer to River Operable Unit, that is everywhere from the dam and the spillway upriver about 1 mile of that area. We have been doing some supplemental remedial investigation on site in that area through this fall timeframe and are still currently going through that. We were able to begin our sampling in October. And the basics on this particular sampling event is we're taking surface and subsurface sediment and materials from the river. We've been collecting various areas in and around the river operable unit as well as downriver. So that includes above the spillway, in the forebay area, all around Bradford Island, around the mouth of Eagle Creek, and around the Goose Island dredge pile. So we're not complete with those. We'll still be continuing we're projecting the February timeframe for this sampling. As we go along, we'll be able to update folks. It has been definitely a long sampling event already. We are seeing tons of gravel, cobbles, lots of really like coarse rocky conditions. So we're not getting tons of sediment, and there are times when that slows the efforts down. But we're getting lots of good information in the river nevertheless. We've also had Oregon DEQ and we've had EPA out to witness some of that sampling. So I'll pause here for a second if Oregon or EPA want to chime in on anything that they witnessed out there. Okay, not seeing any hands. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we're starting to show just some of the details of the sampling we've been doing. This is the downriver area. So if you look at the far right side of your screen, you'll see the whole Bonneville Dam complex lined up on the right side. And then all of these purple boxes here, these are sampling areas that we've been. We've conducted over half of these samples. And the furthest sample downriver, it goes about 5 miles downriver from Bradford. Next slide, please. These are the samples that we've been doing above the dam. This is a really busy slide, but the figure on the top, that's a close-up of the north and east side of Bradford Island. And all those boxes in there are sampling areas. And then the larger picture is that kind of blown out area. It shows you below the Bradford Island near Eagle Creek. And then all the orange boxes on the right, that kind of green box, that's Goose Island over there. And those are all the samples that we were doing on Goose Island and around it. Next slide, please. Okay, looks like we have a question from Mitch. Mitch, go ahead.
Yeah, on that last slide, I keep trying to figure out the Eagle Creek, I think it is. What triggered that?
So Eagle Creek, one of the things that, that would be a concern around Eagle Creek is that there's potentially other sources upriver in Eagle Creek, such as the hatchery that's slightly upriver.
Oh, that's right. I remember Rich went over this before, so I'm good. I remember him telling me that they thought possibly it was upstream of that. Maybe the source was coming out there. So, okay, I remember now. Thank you.
Jay, Kaylin, or Rayanne, anything else you want to add to that regarding Eagle Creek?
No, I think you covered it.
Great. All right, so here's some pictures that we're able to share today. The first one on the far left, this is actually downriver. There were some areas downriver where our locations were dry, basically. The riverbed was, or excuse me, the water was very low. So the riverbed was exposed. And you can see just like how many rocks and cobbles are in that area. It's pretty much the same through most of the river. Some places there's even larger boulders than, these kind of large cobbles that you're seeing here. And they're doing a hand auger sample here. In the middle, you can see one of the freeze cores coming out. So that kind of silver metal rod coming down into the water, that's the freeze core. And then if you look down along that rod, you'll start to see like kind of greenish brown, and that's the sediment that's frozen to that core. And they take the sediment off of there to take the sample. And then finally, you can see a good example of a freeze grab to the far right. So it's basically grabbing those surface sediments, freezing them onto that plate, and then pulling them up. And you can see all the muck that came off of there, even some large cobbles that came up. All right, moving right along. Next slide. Is our video gonna play? Fingers crossed. We have.
Let's see. Here we go.
So this is a video of some of the riverbed. You can see lots of old clam shells in the area, lots of really large rocks here. Kaylin or Jay, do you know offhand what area this was taken in this video?
I looked and see if there was an indication. I believe that is on the south side of Bradford Island. Kaylin, unless you remember differently, but I believe this, if I remember right, that was one of the videos we had posted.
I think you're correct, Jay.
Yeah. So yeah, you can see lots of rocks in there. You know, in between there are little like pockets of sediment and stuff. But as you can imagine, as we're going around trying to find samples to collect, it can be really challenging. As soon as you hit a rock, you know, most of the equipment's really not going to do anything at that point. So, see a question from Mitch. Mitch, go ahead. Mitch, you had a question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, so I think it was last year I had brought this topic of the dead clamshells up to Rich. We'd kind of talked a little bit of it, and then it kind of got kicked off to the side for whatever reason. But when I was up there on Hamilton Island, yeah, the west end of Hamilton downstream, where that little slough goes through and then comes back out down by Beacon Rock. I see you guys did one test there close to the Columbia River, but that channel that runs down through where Hamilton Creek and all that comes down through and sloughs out towards Beacon Rock down there, or Skamania Landing maybe. I got pictures, I think I may have sent them to Rich as well, but I have pictures of like dead clamshells, like massive amounts of clamshells along that portion of that channel. And I'm trying to figure out, did these things just die all the time, or is there a reasoning that these things are dying? Or it just seemed like there was a tremendous amount right at that channel, or whatever it is, that slough, I guess you could call it, that runs in between the end of Hamilton Island and then maybe, I forget what that little island is that you call it now. But there was like massive amounts of dead clamshells. So I've been trying to do the math on that and figure out why there's so many there. And I've been at multiple places on the river and I've never seen that before. So curious if there's a reasoning for so many dead clamshells.
Yeah, I'll say from the core standpoint, I really can't speak to Hamilton Island. Obviously, we're not investigating there. And I don't really know anything about the life cycle of a clam, but I can say from previous sampling we've done in this area, there's also a lot of live clams in this area. Obviously, there's some open shells here. I'll open it up to Kaylin, who's been in the field a lot, or Jay or Rayanne. You know, if you've been seeing lots of live clams, or what's been coming up in the samples. But the previous efforts, when we were doing a lot of like hand gathered surface sampling, we had tons of clams in those samples. So it was actually a big challenge in terms of getting enough sediment. One of the challenges that we face. But yeah, so definitely lots of live clams around Bradford Island. Anything to add from Jay or Kaylin before we go over to Asa?
Yeah, I don't really have anything more specific to add. I can't speak to the life cycle of a clam either. But I guess as far as videos go and what we see in the bottom, this is pretty typical of what we see on the bottom, throughout and around Bradford Island. So, but as far as live versus dead clams, I can't speak any further to it.
Thanks, John.
Jay, this question's for Jay. I don't know what you do. Who?
Jay works for Jacobs, which is the one of the contractors that works for the
Okay.
Army Corps of Engineers. So
Okay.
Jacobs is performing the sampling
That makes sense.
out in the field. Yeah.
That makes sense, not having the knowledge of why.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, over to Asa.
Yeah, I can speak to a little bit of that slough because towards the end of summer, when the water got low, me and Karen were delayed bringing the boat back towards dusk, and the lights of the boat panned over some of that flat, and there was probably about a dozen raccoons out there. It looked like they were digging in the mud and cleaning things. So I assume maybe they were going after those clams. I don't know if it would account for all the clam shells, but it might account for some of them. So just an observation. Thank you.
Hey, this is Rich Francis. I think there are other mammals out there that also eat the clams too. That's from my understanding. I'm not an eco. I mean, I could probably ask my people and they'll probably say the same thing, but if you want, I could reach out and ask around.
Yeah, it'd be nice to, I've tried to do a little research on my own too, and I haven't really found out that. I know it's odd though. I've been in a lot of places on that Columbia River shoreline, and I've never really seen it. I've seen dead clamshells. Yes, I have, even way above the dam. But that area right there just seemed to be just riddled with them. I mean, there was as many dead clamshells as there was rocks.
I know that area around Hampton Island, that's generally, I mean, you can kind of see it in the historical photos that you see from Google Earth and stuff, is that it's a generally shallow area, right? It's not that deep. So that's probably, I mean, it just allows for easier access for raccoons and things like that.
And it does go dry every year as well too. I mean, so there's not constant water over it either.
Mm.
So that may have something, maybe they suffocate and die because they just don't have water.
Mm.
But it'd be nice to know, what goes on there.
Right. Any other questions on the phase 2 sampling? All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we'll move on to Cascades Island. For anyone who's been around but suddenly wasn't, Cascades Island is the newest of the operable units. It's the island directly north of Bradford Island, and it was created back when Powerhouse 2 was essentially dredged from the, there was a dredge channel into the Washington shore, and it created Cascades Island. So we were able to contract out the remedial investigation. We awarded that contract in September this past year, just shortly after we had our last RAB meeting. The remedial investigation, much like the river and the upland areas, is also going to be looking into the nature and extent of contamination around the island. We've conducted a site visit with the contractor, and we are moving forward with the work plan for that. So Jacobs is also going to be working on that investigation for us as well. We will be receiving that work plan, draft work plan from them early this year. And once the Army Corps has finished going through reviewing, making any needed changes, it'll continue through the process. After that, going to regulators and tribes to start their review. Our next few slides, we're actually going to be kind of getting into talking about the background of this particular OU. I'm just going to kick it off a little bit before I turn it over to Rianne. But the last phase that we were in was the preliminary assessment. So purpose of a preliminary assessment, it's really like that initial look at a site to see if there's going to be any potential investigation needed at a site. We went over old historical records, old interviews with staff, interviewed staff on site and folks who had previously been there. There was various reconnaissance on and off site to look into the area and just start evaluating it. And what we were ultimately able to find was that we did actually have other testing that was performed around the time we were conducting the preliminary assessment that identified there was some contamination left in place. Typically, we would have gone on to a site inspection to determine if that was or wasn't the case. Since we were able to do so under this preliminary assessment, we decided to move forward with a remedial investigation. So we have a number of areas that we're going to continue investigation on. And the presentation ahead is going to talk about both the background of Cascades Island, the findings of that preliminary assessment, and then it'll do an overview of all the different areas on Cascades Island that we're going to continue investigating. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Rianne to go over that. Rianne is an employee of Jacobs as well, and she's going to be helping us understand Cascades a little more today. So welcome, Rianne.
Great, thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Rianne Rainwater with Jacobs. I'm going to go over these slides on Cascade Island, just sort of the background and the sites and areas we've identified. So Cascade Island is a 35-acre island. It's located in Washington, in North Bonneville, Washington, and it's part of the Bonneville Dam Complex. It forms the northern end of the Bonneville Dam Complex. As you can see on this figure here, it's just north of Bradford Island. Cascades Island is formerly part of the Washington shoreline, and it was formerly occupied by a railroad line and the town of North Bonneville. And when the Powerhouse 2 in the Northern Channel was constructed around between 1974 and 1981, Cascades Island was created and separated from the new Washington shoreline. So you can see that channel there with Powerhouse 2 connecting Cascades Island to the Washington shoreline. The railroad was rerouted to the north, and the town of North Bonneville was relocated to the west. Next slide. So as part of the preliminary assessment findings, 10 areas were identified for further investigation. These were the auxiliary water supply disposal areas, rock pile ring, 4 buildings, the horseshoe area in Cascade Island fish ladder, gate repair and storage pits, the tie storage area, the turbine intake extension is tie, storm drains, and the former railroad and North Bonneville town buildings, historical equipment storage area, and the contractor laydown area. And I have, if we go to the next slide, the features of these areas are on the slide here. So if you take a look, we have Cascade Island connected by the Powerhouse 2 on the north. There's 2 auxiliary water supply areas, AWS areas to the east and west of the island. And you have the spillway connecting south to Bradford Island. The railroad and the north, the former town are in the northern area. It's not shown on this map, but a couple of features here. The corner collector fish ladder is on the northern edge of the island. You can see that along the Columbia River. That powerhouse is on the northeast side. And then let's see what else is. There's the equipment building, former visitor center, kind of in the west central area. So we'll go into a little more information on each of these areas that were identified as part of the PA. And let's go ahead and talk about the AWS area. So there are actually 2 auxiliary water supply disposal areas. This is the east area. The AWS supplies extra water to the fish ladder collection channels. So, and over time, sediment kind of builds up in this AWS system and it's cleaned out. And 2 areas on Cascade Island is where they dispose of the sediments from this clean out. There's the east and the west areas. The eastern area here is a long grassy point, and it's just kind of southeast of the rigging building and powerhouse 2. And if you want to go to the next slide, just so they can orientate themselves to the west as well. And then the western area includes service roads, kind of large graveled areas, and a grassy area. Sandy material with like shell debris has been observed in these areas, indicating that that's potential AWS clean out material, the sediments that were cleaned out, and then they were placed there. Prior to 2023, these materials were disposed of, in the AWS disposal areas were not characterized. Therefore, additional sampling as part of the remedial investigation was recommended in the PA. Next slide, unless anyone has. Good. This is the rock pile ring. So the rock pile ring is a large feature on Cascades Island. So you can see it here. It's kind of it's not really a ring. It's sort of like a wedge and it's basically comprised of large riprap, which is mostly big rocks and concrete pieces. And when we went out there for our site walk, the area is mostly covered by moss. The area is basically a stockpiled riprap that was removed from the North Shore when the corner collector was installed in the early 2000s. And based on aerial photography, which is what this photo is on the right, it was placed somewhere between 2003 and 2005. It's a pretty big area too. It's about 5 feet thick on the south and 10 feet thick on the north. Okay, so the building. So there's 4 buildings, and the first of the 4 buildings is this former visitor center. The former visitor center was originally constructed in 1933, and it served as a visitor contact station near Eagle Creek Trail in Oregon. I'm not from Oregon, so that's the Mount Hood area. And the visitor center was relocated to its current location on Cascades Island in 1952 and served as a visitor center until 2008. Over the decades, the building's exterior paint and the roofing materials have deteriorated. And during the PA, the presence of lead-based paint was confirmed on the exterior siding and trim. So as part of the PA, the presence and extent of lead-based paint in the surrounding soils remains unknown and requires further investigation. All right, next slide. The small storage shed. The small storage shed was built in somewhere between 2009 and 2016. It currently remains in use, and it serves as a storage space for non-hazardous items. Deteriorated paint, as you can see in this picture, was observed during the PA, and it was recommended for further investigation. The equipment building. This building is located in the central portion of the island, just kind of north of the former visitor center. It was constructed between 2011 and 2016 to provide weather protection storage for large equipment and vehicles used as part of the dam operations. It currently serves as a primary storage facility for gas and diesel powered equipment. It's actually it's a single-story open bay facility, so it opens to the south, and it's about 12,000 square feet. It has 2 floor drains located inside the building. As part of the PA, it was recommended for further investigation to investigate where vehicles drove in and out or parked and around the floor drains to verify whether there are fuel or oil spills in that area. And the 4th building we have is the rigging building, which is over just kind of, it's on the east side of the island, just south of the powerhouse 2. It was constructed between 2000 and 2003 to support the Bonneville Dam operations. It currently serves as a storage facility for rigging gear and equipment maintenance. The PA recommended this building for further investigation of the soil around the building to verify if there were any spills of hydraulic oils or petroleum products that may have occurred. This is the Horseshoe and Fish Ladder area. The Horseshoe area is surrounded by the Cascades Island Fish Ladder here. As you can see, it's that kind of, it's almost got like a horseshoe shape. And then by the northern support of the spillway. And the spillway actually houses one of the sites, the gate repair and storage pits on the east there. The metal building just to the west of the spillway was formerly used for equipment storage, and it's on the eastern part of the horseshoe area, kind of adjacent to the spillway. And then vehicles can access this area over a bridge that spans the northwestern part of the fish ladder, right below the words of fish ladder. So the Cascades Island Fish Ladder was constructed between 1936 and 1937 with unfinished concrete. There's also a building that was constructed on the northern half of the horseshoe area in 1955 to study fish. And it operated until a roof collapsed in 1980 during a snowstorm. So that area is kind of like in that northern part, sort of in that orange area, there was a building up there. And the building was demolished and buried in place. It was basically paved over in 1983. This area also has potholes and areas of subsidence which were observed around 2005. And a former employee stated that sandblast grit was used to repair these holes. There was also some historical site investigations performed, and they detected concentrations of lead and PCBs in the near surface soil samples. And they were collected near the repair areas, the repair areas and sinkholes. So as part of the PA, it was recommended that additional soil sampling to characterize the surface and subsurface soil in the horseshoe area. And next slide. Okay. The gate and storage pits, the gate repair and storage pits are basically two large interior concrete chambers within the northern abutment of the spillway. So right below that road of the spillway, that's the view on the left of the map. And below that, the picture you see on the right is the inside of one of the chambers. And it was historically used to repair and for repair and maintenance of the spillway gates. During a clean out in 2010, samples showed lead contaminated soil was left in place under a slab of concrete following clean out of all the gate repair and storage pits. So the PA recommended further investigation of this area due to the samples they identified during the clean out. It's kind of an interesting area too, because it's inside a building with concrete floors. So. Next slide. So the storm drains is another area, and it kind of encompasses a lot of Cascades Island. There's about 40 storm drains. Those are the ones in red. And then there's 3 outfalls on the east side of the island. You can see the green dots. Those are the outfalls. There's no stormwater data available to evaluate whether anything was discharged into the stormwater system. So further investigation to characterize accumulated sediments in the stormwater catch basins have been recommended by the PA. So we'll be taking a look at these storm drains. Okay, the former railroad in North Bonneville town area is another site. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the northern portion of the Cascades Island was originally part of the Washington shoreline. So you can almost see that's like a puzzle that fits. And it contained the town of North Bonneville and a segment of the railroad. And the railroad was rerouted to the north, and the town of North Bonneville was relocated to the west when this channel was formed and the Powerhouse 2 was built. The identity and use of these buildings in the historic North Bonneville, situated in that northern part, kind of above. If you take a look at this figure, this is a 1981 figure, and it's showing the former shoreline is what's in orange, is that line in orange, and the former railroad is shown in purple. So the site that we're investigating is the area from the purple, the railroad, and north. For what was the former Bonneville, the former town buildings. So the identity and use of the the specific buildings of this town that were situated in this area of the island it's unknown. The demolition materials associated with these buildings and the railroad, and much of the soil, when Cascades Island was constructed, were removed to Hamilton Island. There are no known records of environmental releases associated with these historical town buildings or railroad, and we don't have any data in this area. So the PA recommended sampling of this area to determine whether there's any potential residual contamination from the former town or the railroad that remain.
We have a hand up.
Okay.
Mitch.
Yeah, this is Mitch Patton. Hey, so this is an area that I've really had a lot of concern with, is the old town and the railroad and the material being moved. And now that Cascade Island potentially, or is already part of the NPL, I'm not clear on that, but either way, it's a potential that's going to be. But these materials that were removed from here, as you mentioned, a lot of it went to Hamilton Island. But I've also been told and talked to quite a few people that were on this construction project that a lot of this material also as well is what's underneath that elevated railroad track to the north. And are you guys looking at that as potential offsite material been transported as well, or is it just clear outside the realm of looking further where this contamination has ended up at?
So our investigation is the areas that we're going over now on Cascades Island. I don't offhand know if we own that land with that railroad or not. So I wouldn't be able to really get into talking about the railroad on the current Washington shore.
Yeah, I think it's, according to the fence line that's around the town and whatnot, I think that railroad actually is part of North Bonneville now, so Army Corps may not own it any longer.
Yeah. But
the
in
point
general,
being
our
is-
records are that the all the material that was excavated out of that to make that channel above what is now Cascades Island went into Hamilton Island, the separate Superfund site.
Yep, and none of it.
And I know we have some other potential topics later that you had emailed about.
Yeah.
Kind of talking about other areas that you want to chat about, but.
Right. Yeah, but this one concern that I have is that when that railroad was built, that material came from the second powerhouse construction. The whole thing was built off of that. So we need to know where that material came from, is what I think.
Yeah, we have gotten no indications through going through the either the Bradford nor the Cascades investigations thus far that any material went under that particular railroad. But again, I have no information on who owns the railroad, whose land it's on, and then who built it. So it's definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
To my knowledge, the Corps doesn't own the railroad.
No, that's what I mean. They don't, but the project itself, when they relocated it, just as they relocated the town of North Bonneville and all that construction fill went into the town of North Bonneville, it's the same situation as that when they relocated, that was Army Corps' part of their bargaining agreement was to replace and realign that railroad system, and then fill material, obviously, that railroad sits on is 25 feet above ground or better. There's a tremendous amount of fill underneath that elevated railroad track. So anyhow, it's just something to think about, and I'll keep digging on it and maybe I can get some answers.
Sure. And keep in mind too that, fill material can end up just being soil. It's not necessarily construction debris. And fill material wouldn't indicate like hazardous waste necessarily.
Correct.
But of course, anything you come across, and if you're coming across any interviews, definitely by all means send them our way. So, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Great. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is the historic equipment storage area. This area is located just to the east of the gate repair and storage pit. It's on the upstream side of the spillway. And equipment was stored in this area from about 1961 through at least 2000, but there's no documentation what type of equipment was stored. Around 2009, approximately 10 to 15 feet of soil was removed from this area to alleviate stress on the gate repair and storage pits wall. So you can kind of see in that picture to the right, there's like kind of a line staining that you can tell from the previous soil that was excavated. There's no documentation to indicate if soil samples were taken during the removal of the soil. And it's unknown if the soil was contaminated or if it was removed from the area. So the PA recommended further sampling in this area as part of the RI. And then last, we have the contractor laydown area. This is just south of the rigging building. It's kind of that area that looks like there's a road leading to the AWS. It's that kind of rounded dirt looking area. The contractor laydown area is how it sounds. It's where contractors put equipment and vehicles during maintenance activities. There's been no reports of or observations of any kind of release of any hazardous substance in this area. And there were no observable spills of materials present during the site visit. But further sampling is recommended to determine whether there's any unreported releases that have occurred during the laydown operations. So we'll be looking at that during the RI. And I think that's all I have. Those are the areas. And then Megan already went over the schedule, and I'll send it back to you, Megan.
We have a hand up, Kate.
Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. I had just a couple of questions. I think it was slide 23 with the equipment building. You mentioned there was 2 drains there. And I was just wondering, like, if anyone knew where the drains led to, and also, are there any other drains in any other buildings that might lead somewhere, and like whether that's been assessed?
Yeah, that's part of our ongoing investigation. One of the other slides, let me see if I can just locate it real quick. Let us go back to slide number 27, please. Perfect. So these storm drains listed here, these are the drains that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. So these are all the drains that have been located on the project, as well as those outfalls in the green. And as part of our investigation, we're looking into how that storm system all connects together and where that water goes. So yeah, that's part of our active investigation.
And those drains that are inside the buildings are indicated on this slide?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the building that we were just talking about, I believe that those are the 2 on the very far left. There's kind of a group of 4 on the far left, okay. And I believe it's that 2 in the top.
Okay, yeah.
Are those 2 in the building.
Thank you. My next question was about slide 28. And I don't know if anybody will know the answer to this, but I'm looking at this visually and seeing that, you know, there's some different visual differences in some of the land masses, like the spit and the eastern side of Bradford Island, compared to when I look at like Google Maps today. And I'm just wondering, like, is there any information about like what the water levels were during this time, or what else might account for the change in visually, the change in the shape? I know some of it might have been like some removal action, maybe around the spit, but just curious if there was any additional context for that.
Let's see. I know we've looked into this a little bit before, so I'm kind of just going off of memory here. I believe what we found with the spit is that it was, so just for folks' reference and to make sure I'm looking at the same thing as you, Kate, I believe we're talking about that little sliver of land in between Bradford Island and the Oregon shore, correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and that even in the past, that used to be even bigger. I believe it was for the navigation channel that was dredged out.
Okay.
And then, so to my knowledge, that's like kind of part of that. I believe that's part of what ended up making up Goose Island. I could be misspeaking there. But yeah, that's something we've looked at previously.
I guess one of the things it's making me think about in terms of, like, for example, the landfill on the eastern tip of Bradford Island. And I think, Rich, am I right that you said like it was built 15 feet from the edge of the island, or maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly, but so we had talked before about like concerns about erosion on the cliffside, and I'm just wondering, like, when was it, like what year was it 15 feet away from, or if that's the correct figure, and like, are we assessing over time, you know, accounting for erosion, and if that's affecting the 15-foot buffer or whatever buffer there may have been? Does that make sense?
Hey, Kate, this is Rich. Yeah, that makes sense. Look, I share the desire to know what the erosion is on the banks of the, you know, adjacent to the landfill. That would be interesting. I think at this point, at this stage, though, when we've got this removal action, I think that once we get on the other side of the removal action, I think that the erosion is going to be kind of a moot point, because quite a bit of that's going to be excavated out. And, you know, we've been talking about this, you know, in our design meetings, that, you know, I wouldn't expect, because they're going to have to, if they dig down all 15 feet, I wouldn't expect there to be a 15-foot hole with a 15-foot mud wall separating the hole from the river, right? I would expect that they would probably knock that riverbank down and lay it down, and you know, instead of having to try and deal with, you know, side slopes and everything for that kind of river. So I think if you that kind of information that you would want now to get a good look at that, besides, you know, doing you know, some Google Earth, you know, images and things like that, and to go out and looking at historical records, to go out and like try to quantify that right now would probably take 18 months, maybe 2 years to get any workable data on that. And so by that time the landfill is going to be removed. So
okay. And in that removal action, is there like a contingency plan for if they keep finding things closer and closer to the edge, like that they would be able to lay those cliffs back or something? Like they have that in mind? Is there?
Well, we haven't seen, with you know, we saw from the slide earlier that we haven't actually seen the draft work plan yet. So, but those are absolutely concerns that have been brought up in the meetings and have been discussed. Yeah, for sure. As well as how far down they're going to dig once if they hit groundwater, where specific locations are for things like the paint mixing area and maybe some disposal area for pesticides and things like that. Like we've really gotten down into the weeds on what we want to know and what we want to get out of that removal, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add on just a little bit to what Rich said. So yeah, the work plan will get into, like, you know, how we're going to be able to handle, you know, some amount to some amount we can get into the details of how we'll be handling things. But some of these items, it's going to end up being, we're going to have to make decisions in the field. So, you know, like if we're trying to understand if we can continue to safely excavate, for example, things like that will be decisions made in the field. And then, of course, the NICR work plan, talking about those kind of details, we'll have a presentation about that at a future meeting as well.
Okay. And this is still, and we're still under the restriction of, like, you can't test for the PCBs to call for further removal. Is that still the case for this particular part of the process?
So we are planning on doing some PCB testing of the leave surfaces. So for anyone not familiar with that term, basically after you excavate the surface that's left over to characterize those areas of what's there. And then any waste that's taken off site, we will characterize the waste as well. And that's going to be characterized based on what the landfills require us to test. And of course, we expect PCBs to be part of that. more
Yeah.
details about that will come out in the work plan too.
And but the PCBs wouldn't in and of themselves trigger further removal because they're not. Is that right?
Not necessarily triggering further removal, but I mean, that starts to get into a lot of other questions, like what are you actually seeing there? For example, are we seeing debris there? Of course, we continue to remove it. Are we seeing sheen there? Okay, of course, we're gonna, continue to remove sheen as long as that's safe.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thanks, Kate. Over to Mitch. Mitch, you're still on mute.
I had a question on the Bradford Island and the Hamilton Island. I know I keep hearing that we can only speak to the Bradford Island Superfund cleanup, but since Hamilton Island wasn't on the national priority list at one time as contaminated soils, do we know, were there any tests done for PCBs there?
I personally can't speak to that since I wasn't involved in that project on that particular Superfund site. But there is the EPA has a website. EPA has a website about Hamilton Island where you can find all the old documentation that they went through as part of that CERCLA investigation.
Yeah, but it's not something that would be on Army Corps' radar, EPA's radar, is what you're saying, that we have to physically ourselves go find out.
Well, I know that's where the information is, so that's what I'm sharing.
Okay, but again, it's not on Army Corps' radar, is what you're saying.
Well, it's not. It's a closed Superfund site, and from my recollection, it's also been handed off. It's been like bought or transitioned over to Washington County, excuse me, to Skamania County, I think. So it's not it's not a clear project anymore. And not having the experience on that project, I can't speak to it here.
I can chime in a little bit, Megan.
Sure.
So I think we've talked about this. That okay, I am now when you go to look up Superfund Hamilton Island Superfund site and you go to the EPA website, my name will pop up first thing on there. So I am the project manager for Hamilton Island, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anything's going on, right? Like when a site gets listed, right? And you saw the slide that had the process earlier. There's a preliminary assessment, there's a remedial investigation, and then feasibility study, yada yada yada, right? So the preliminary assessment from the preliminary assessment for Hamilton Island showed that because it was construction debris and there weren't a lot of records associated with it, that there was, it was reasonable to be placed on the national priorities list. And that happens. When they actually did the investigation, though, the rod that was brought out was a no further action rod. And that doesn't mean that, and I have to kind of explain this, because no further action for EPA means that no remedial action was done. That doesn't mean that there weren't controls put in place. I should just say that. So there were institutional controls put in place, deed restrictions, and those were handed off to the state of Washington. And so Skamania County, and I have some records from them dividing up some of the easternmost parcels of Hamilton Island. That they go and they test those soils and they remediate it as necessary whenever they sell it and it changes hands. The actual footprint of Hamilton Island landfill is a little bit further south and west from all those areas, though. So that area has still remained undisturbed.
Right. I guess my question is, and I haven't been able to find anything out looking at the researchers through ecology and whatnot on the studies and stuff that I found. I don't see anything that says that national priority site on Hamilton Island itself, not Hamilton Island parcel number 2, which is what you're talking about, that the county owns today, or Port of Skamania owns it actually. But back where the NPL site is, were there any testing done for PCBs? That's my question.
Yes, there was testing done for PCBs. Yeah.
And then the numbers that they found.
You know, Mitch, you're asking me to pull up some pretty, like I'm flurrying right now to try and bring up these documents, but you're asking me for something about Hamilton Island, which is a closed Superfund site. So
Well,
you
the question is,
how about this? How about let me go back in through the documents, and so we won't waste anyone else's time here. Let me go back through the documents. I will email the entire group here what I know about Hamilton Island and the tests that were done at Hamilton Island and basically the status of Hamilton Island. And if anyone has any further questions, you can get with me about it.
the other question is, it'd be nice to know is because I know our parts per million today are a lot different than they were back in 87 and whenever they released this site. Just wondering if the parts per million today would throw up any red flags compared to what it was when they give it
You mean the concentrations at which we would deem something to be hazardous or not?
Yeah, because haven't those numbers changed quite drastically between then and now?
They have. They
Okay.
have.
Okay.
Whether or not a site gets reopened because of a change in the the hazard quotient or the non-cancer risk associated with certain concentrations, that would be a reopener for Superfund sites. The thing about Hamilton Island is it was been delisted. So you would have to go through an entire new process for opening up a Superfund site. And it's even harder now because it's been a delisted site. So
it just seems to me like where it's connected, we know it's connected to the Bonneville Dam complex. And now that Cascade Island all of a sudden is become part of it, I think we need to really look further into this and not just say, well, it's hard to do it. Doesn't really seem like a good
No,
answer
I'm not
to me.
saying that it's hard to do. I'm saying that it's been done. I've looked through it. My supervisors have looked through it. I've had my whole team look through it, and there's no there when it comes to Hamilton Island. So I'm just telling everybody that right now. There's no there when it comes to Hamilton Island. The association that Hamilton Island has with Bonneville Dam, it actually has with North Bonneville, the town, more, because that was the demolition construction debris that was placed in Hamilton Island whenever they tore down the city. The risks that are associated with Cascades Island, now OU3, and I got to tell you this, I would expect Goose Island to be OU3 and not Cascades Island. Let me just say that right now. Goose Island is probably going to be OU4, but the risks that we have seen, and we've taken a walk around, and DEQ has also taken a walk around, and we've discussed this. A lot of the risks that we see from Hamilton Island comes from their gate cleaning and their gate maintenance operations that occurred inside one of those buildings, and then had a storm drain that was associated with it that we don't know where that storm drain went. The stuff that's going on the outside, you have the one visitor complex that has lead paint, which big surprise there. The red paint on has higher lead concentration. That's historically known. So there was no real surprise there when it came to that. We are going to let the investigation play through for all the other areas. But I would be surprised if we saw very much come from the ambient kind of, historical contamination that's been going on out there, as opposed to very specific things that have gone on in Hamilton Island, which is different.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Sure. And like I said, I will dig into Hamilton Island, and I will email everybody here the status of it and share documents and everything.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Rich. I'm going to bring us back into our Bradford Island scope here. I see Kate has her hand up. Kate?
Yeah, sorry. Rich, can you repeat what you just, the building, which was the building that you said had the drain where nobody knew where it went?
It's the gate repair building.
Okay. Is that one of the red boxes indicated on that storm drain map where you're investigating where it's going?
No, actually, no. These are the storm drains that we're looking at are all associated with exterior storm drains, as opposed to that the drain that's in that maintenance room, and it's the the gate maintenance room. It's not a storm drain. It's just a drain, which is now, I think now it's connected to the water treatment system. But before it got connected to the water treatment system, we don't know where that went.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
So
and they did sandblasting and stuff in that room, so there was a large pile of sandblast grit that went into the drain, and so that's what we're worried about when it comes to Cascades Island, more so than other stuff. But I'm not saying there's nothing there. I don't want to get in trouble for going for doing a hand waving or anything. I want to see the investigation play out, though.
Okay, so that's being investigated. And then Megan, the 2 drains we talked about earlier off the, or was I talking to Megan, or who? What about equipment buildings? Those are extra storm drains off that building?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, those equipment buildings are basically like big open buildings.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a big bay area, and it looked like from what we saw that those drains were associated with a parking lot, and they threw up a building around those drains.
Okay.
And but I will say this, and I have said this more than one. I've told Army Corps more than one time that slide that they had that shows all those drains, they really need to have arrows pointing to where those drains go.
Yeah, that'd be super helpful. Yeah.
Yep. So more to come on this figure for sure. I believe that's all the slides that we had for Cascades Island. So any other questions from our RAB members? Not seeing any other hands. I'll open it up to anyone else on the line have any questions about Cascades Island or any of the other material we've discussed so far tonight. Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question to understand, like the sampling plan that you've done to date for the PCBs, was there any coupled HEC-RAS sediment transport modeling done to inform that, or other means to, create your start point for that sampling?
Yeah, so there was sediment modeling done as part of building the work plan for the phase 2 river supplemental remedial investigation. And that's the river work that's going on now. If you go into that work plan, you can find figures that show how the sediment moves around the islands, both when the spillways are open and when the spillways are closed. And that helped us determine where to sample. Sweet.
Thank you very much. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
This is Rich. I'm sorry, Megan. I kind of have to clarify that. Those models that you show don't necessarily show the way sediment moves through the system. They show flow regimes. Which is basically, the velocity going through whether it's open or not. Not necessarily, without knowing the specifics about the sediment, you wouldn't really have a transport model there. I will say this though, and to Glenn's question, going out there and observing and taking the samples and observing what's out there, it's getting harder and harder for us to define Bradford Island as a sediment site. On our side, because there's lots of kind of heavier, I wouldn't say cobbles, but debris and things like, not debris, but rocks and things like that. There's not a lot of fine grained sediment going through there. It's a pretty energetic system, so we're not seeing a lot of deposition out there so far. But like I said, we'll wait and see what the investigation says. But from my own observations out there, and then even in areas that aren't associated with the spillway and some of the southern areas, we're not seeing a lot of sediment out there. So we think that it further informs and kind of validates the idea that the contamination that's around the North Shore of Bradford Island is generally from debris and the incomplete removal action that happened in the early aughts.
Yeah, that's fair. Appreciate the clarification, Rich.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that, Rich. I'll apologize, folks. I didn't mean to misspeak to the point of being incorrect there. But Rich is far smarter than I am when it comes to sediment movements, all of that kind of stuff. So definitely listen to him. Over to Kate.
Thank you. I was just wondering, as far as the like the gate repair, are there other, are these the only gates associated with this site? Are there other gates that would have had to be repaired that were associated with the infrastructure of the dam?
Yeah, the gates that we're talking about for this repair facility, these are the spillway gates specifically.
Okay.
And there are other gates on the project. So there are gates that are used on both of the powerhouses. They do get worked on within the powerhouses themselves. There's gate repair. Not gate repair. Powerhouse gate repair areas, and those are all like active areas. So those would be, if anything, those would potentially be like a RCRA investigation. They'd be outside of this CERCLA project.
Okay. Thank you.
So those are active use areas. So, Mitch, I see you have a question as well. Mitch, we still got you on mute.
Okay, hey, yeah. So I was wondering, after Rich had said that at the Bradford Island that they're not seeing sediment around there and whatnot, is that possibly due to the fact that the current that flows through has just basically got any of the contamination scoured out and it's flushed downstream? Why you don't find sediment along Bradford Island?
Rich, do you want to talk to that? Or I can have Jacob.
Well, the scour of contaminated materials through the spillway and downstream was the whole reason why we wanted them to do, I think it was I forget what slide it was, maybe in the teens or something like that, where they did the downstream investigations. So yeah, given the fact that this stuff was, these transformers were put in the river, 50, 60 years ago, material that got contaminated from that, probably washed downstream. And once we see the end result of this investigation, the other side of this investigation, we'll know if there's anything contaminated down there. But it is very, like I said, it's very energetic though. So that doesn't seem like there's very much opportunity for sediment to sit and cycle through, like when you think about a river system where you have sediment that erodes and then it just kind of does this kind of rolling kind of action as it goes down the river, of deposition, then erosion, deposition, erosion, depending on the water height and things like that. We're not really seeing that too much in this area, not from what I can see. It's mostly just gravel out there, which is the word I was trying to get earlier that I totally brain farted. Mostly we're seeing a lot of gravel down there in the bottom. So yeah. And contaminated sediments generally are more fine than that.
Okay, cool. And then I guess the other question I had is that we're talking about the scouring out and flushing downstream, which is probably the most logical answer is what's happened here. I know down below, I've done a lot of sturgeon fishing on the Columbia River, and there's some fairly deep holes below Bonneville Dam towards Skamania Landing and then below Skamania Landing. But I see you got the sample. I don't know, did it go clear to Skamania Landing, and did they sample any of those deep 90-foot holes for sediment to be in the bottoms of them, or did this do shoreline sediment?
So I'm not exactly sure where Skamania Landing is, but we sampled as far downriver as 5 miles. The areas that were chosen, they were areas that were assumed and, by our previous investigations, we feel like those are the areas most likely to have sediment buildup. So sediment kind of moved through the system and then deposited into those areas. So we're kind of trying to chase where we think sediment would be.
Right. So I'll have to go back and look at our river charts, but I'm almost positive Well, I'm fairly positive, I should say, that I think your study ended before that deep hole that's just off of Skamania Landing. It would be downstream of where the study had quit. And that's one question that I've had since I come on the RAB board was why are we not testing these deep holes on the Columbia River clear down to even Cape Horn? There's 4 or 5 several deep holes that are 80, 90 feet deep in those stretches of the river there. And I just wondered why we have never looked inside of them. But hopefully
Well-
hopefully you'll find information that the shoreline is contaminated and further investigation will happen.
Mitch, I think I probably misspoke here that, you know, when I had said that, yeah, there's likelihood that contaminants wash downstream, which is why we want to do the investigation. That's not necessarily from sediment transport of the materials. I mean, we're talking about free oils and things like that would get caught up in the current and just get washed down. The gravel that we're seeing out there isn't necessarily a good sponge and a good mechanism for transporting that. And you can see whenever they showed the pictures of their downstream sampling, whenever the water was a little low, that's all gravel out there. They're not in sandy areas whenever they're doing those samples, and those are the areas that are underwater most of the year. So we're just not seeing sediment out there. So the idea that there's contaminated sediment that moved down, if it has been happening, it's not to such a degree that like say Portland Harbor or Hudson Bay or other areas that have large masses of fine grained sediment, which is what would be the transport mechanism for the contamination to be rolling through this system.
Yeah,
it's all very rocky down there. It's very rocky.
In my personal opinion, I feel it would be in everybody's best interest that we do some sampling in them deep water holes because they are a sediment trap and they are going to catch the finer stuff. It's going to settle down. It's going to fall to the bottom and the current goes over the top. And I think there's going to be some really good information inside those deep water holes downstream of Bonneville Dam. But that's obviously, as everybody says, the wheels turn slowly on this whole thing. So hopefully at some point, somebody will say, hey, let's look in the bottom of them things and see what's in there. That's all I got.
Right. Thanks, Mitch. I believe this takes us to the end of our technical discussion. So next slide, please. All right, so we've got a couple things left here. I'll quickly go over the meeting dates and then we have some RAB topics or some RAB discussion afterwards. So our next meeting will be on March 10th. That's going to be our final online only meeting for this kind of wintry season here. And then we'll be heading back on May 12th to the Hedgewald Center in Stevenson. If we keep along with our drumbeat right now, that'll put us at July 14th for the following meeting. We would also be planning that for a combination of in-person and online. Just to clarify, May 12th, it would also have an online component as well for anyone who's needing to join us virtually. Upcoming topics, the NCRA work plan is going to be our next big topic. We're not exactly sure where that's going to fall at this time. It really depends on how the reviews and discussions go with the regulators and the tribes. May be that ideal time frame to go over the NCRA work plan. But ultimately, if we need to have an ad hoc to go over that one, that could be, that might be something that we need to do so that we're giving the community a chance to basically learn about what we're going to be doing before we get out there. Any other potential topics from either our RAB members or anything that the public is kind of interested to hear more about? Okay, well, I don't want to hold up any more discussion on that since I know we have a couple RAB discussion topics. Lisa, did you have something you need to
Um,
add real quick?
I just wanted to say before we end the meeting, we need a couple email addresses so we can do it after, but just for people not to leave.
Sure.
Because there's a few people
so-
online that we would like to add to our mailing list.
Yeah. For folks online, if you're not on the mailing list and you would like to join, please, if you're able to, stay behind a couple minutes and we can either grab that info from you or we can tell you who to talk to get on the mailing list. However you'd like to handle that. All right, next slide, please.
Okay.
All right, so we have a couple items that were requested for RAB discussion. Mitch, just so you know, I did for one of those topics, which was the Appropriations Act language. I do have that paragraph on a separate slide if you want to refer to that. Otherwise, I don't have any other information to present. Unfortunately, we just didn't have any time to do so. But I know you had a couple topics, so I'm going to hand it over to start in on those.
Okay, yeah, the one on the new legislation and stuff, trying to get the verbiage more clear on what the way I understand it is about what's time sensitive or time critical versus non-critical, and that some of the language in the new laws are trying to get passed will actually kind of, instead of leaving this gray window open of what's time sensitive, what isn't, and how this project is moving forward, it's going to kind of be a nudge. And so I'm hoping that the bill gets passed or the laws get passed and kind of nudges this along a little more than what it has been doing over the last 50 years of pretty much neglect. But I realize we can't just run in there, like Rich has mentioned a few times, you just can't run in there and start digging and then all of a sudden create a bigger issue. I totally understand that, but we still need to get some kind of movement forward and what's going on this project. And that's kind of where I was on that. And then the other email that I sent that I'd like to probably have added to the agenda for the next time for topic.
Mitch, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Can I talk about this one real quick before we move to the second topic? Would that be okay?
Sure, or I could finish and then you can come back. It's up to you.
Okay. Yeah, if it's okay, I'd like to just quickly talk about the Appropriations Act.
Okay.
Just so I'll try to keep everything separate and clear.
Okay.
So I just wanted to acknowledge the Appropriations Act. This is from a larger Appropriations Act bill. Bradford Island is already authorized project. So this, just to be clear to folks, this isn't kind of like adding anything new to Bradford Island. What this does, one like very positive thing about having Bradford Island very specifically called out in the Appropriations Act is it demonstrates that both at highest levels of the Army Corps of Engineer, as well as higher levels of the government and the Congress, that Bradford Island is a priority. We really don't have any direction in this this paragraph that leads us to, or that tells us specifically to do a time critical or a non-time critical. It does mention early removal of the landfill, but that language can include either of those methods. But that's kind of what I wanted to just kind of briefly highlight for folks, because I know that's always kind of a thing of concern, is just making sure that we have sufficient funding from Congress to keep everything moving. So I was, at least personally, I was really pleased to see this popping up in the Appropriations Act.
Yep. And then as far as the time critical, time sensitive, non-sensitive, time critical, I really struggle with this language with Bradford Island because it's sitting in the middle of the Columbia River and it's one of the highest PCB levels in the nation, but yet it's not time sensitive. So that's a whole nother argument that is going to take a lot more time than what we have here tonight. So I'll move on to the next set of emails and stuff that I send in, that, and I would like to have that set of emails brought up onto the agenda and brought into our next meeting to go over for further discussion. If possible. If not, we'll find other ways around it to get the information and discussions with everybody else. But the thing that I've been trying to focus on, and I get shut down every time about it because it doesn't have to do with Bradford Island. And the problem that we have here is I'm fairly confident, 99% confident, that there's materials from Bonneville Dam Complex that went into the Stevenson landfill. And now, recently, in this last year, my wife knows somebody that's been doing metal detecting down at the fairgrounds in Stevenson. And I've often wondered about it, that I don't remember, because it was a mill pond for years. I'm going like, I don't remember it being that big of an area, but I never put two and two together until this county worker told the lady she could no longer do metal detecting down there because the soil that is on that site came from Bonneville Dam and is possibly contaminated. And so that opened up a rabbit hole that I tried to get public records requests. Finally, the county did send them to me, and they were very thorough on what they sent. And the aerial photos clearly show there's a massive fill area that went in there, and it just so happens to fall. The first photo, well, not the first one, but one that would be closest to 85, 1975 to 1985. 1975, you can see in that photo that I sent you, there's water body everywhere. The one in 1985, which is after the dam completion and a lot of the materials were moved around, there's this huge land body. And I've also shared with many of the RAB members and everybody the thesis from the Portland State University person that talked about the 28 million tons, or I don't know the exact number, but it was in the millions of tons or yards of material that was potentially going to the Stevenson landfill. And so that all being said, it just seems like we need to really, and I know this is where I get shut down at every time, is this is not Bradford Island. We're not looking at that, but it's clear that we need to be looking at off-site material. And I don't know why nobody wants to do that. I don't know what it is. And looking at the aerial photos, the 1985 one compared to 75, that falls right into that era of the second powerhouse, does seem to be, there should be some good reasoning to maybe do some, and maybe it should be done through Department of Ecology, Washington State, not EPA, or not, but it seems like you guys would be able to nudge them and say, hey, you know what, we got this thing. Let's look at it and see if there's a potential public hazard going on there, because why in the world would we have a county employee making that statement if he didn't know, or she, I don't know who it was, but didn't know that fill that's in there came from Bonneville Dam. I mean, why would that statement be made? And so I think there's something that we need to, as the RAB and as Bonneville Dam complex itself, it just seems to me that we really need to start looking outside that complex, because I'm quite confident that it is not contained to Bradford Island or the new Cascade Island. I think this stuff is scattered all over the place. And so that's kind of where I was on that. And then I'll leave it open to anybody else, any further discussions. And like I said, though, I'd like to at least put it on the agenda for the next time for further discussion if possible.
Okay. Rich, would you mind if I started off?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So there's definitely a lot of information here. I was able to look at a little bit of the, well, I say a little bit of this. I did go through all the information this morning. Since I got it later last night, I obviously didn't have a lot of time to look at this. So I'll say that right up front. But The first thing I really want to address is you mentioned a couple times being shut down every time we talk about this. And I am struggling with that a little bit because I feel like I've given a lot of latitude to have these discussions. And then I always try to talk about, if I believe a discussion is off topic of Bradford Island, I do leave room to explore whether there is any ties. And if there's not, I've still been allowing these discussions to happen. I haven't cut anyone off. So I kind of want to put that out there because I just want to try to make sure that we're keeping these discussions kind and respectful here. So I'm going to put that out first. Putting that aside though, and just kind of getting into the meat of what's here. For the Stevenson landfill, so what I read through the email chain, it did not, it appeared to be pertaining specifically to the fairgrounds. So it didn't seem like there was any new information about Stevenson landfill. But you did mention at some point receiving some aerials. If you have aerials of Stevenson that you want to provide, please do. I saw aerials of the fairgrounds. But if there was anything missing there in terms of Stevenson landfill for either aerials or other documentation, please do send that along so we can take a look at that. Otherwise, as discussed in previous meetings, a few different times, we don't have any documentation on the core side that we ever placed anything in Stevenson landfill. I am aware at one point you had sent in some dialogue, and I can't remember offhand. It was a while ago, but I believe it was you or another RAB member had provided an email chain between the Army Corps of Engineers and a landfill somewhere in the Oregon or Washington area. It was a request to place things in the landfill, and the landfill denied the request. So as far as we knew, that was as far as it went. We got a denial. It points to that there was never anything placed there. Going over towards the fairgrounds, I saw in the email chain that you included, there was some dialogue between the person and I think it was Miss Stacy Patton. It did seem that that person tried to reiterate that like contaminated and hazardous materials was not in fact the reason for they were requesting no metal detecting in that area. They were requesting like no holds be made because of the potential for tripping hazard. That person did go on to say that they had grown up in that area and they had heard about potential materials like fill materials from Cascades or from other places on Bonneville, being placed at the fairgrounds. We don't have any documentation of that. Our documentation all points to Hamilton Island. But I think to, investigate that claim further, we would either need a lot of people being able to claim like, oh yes, we have also heard this as folks growing up, or we would need someone who had kind of been involved in that process, like someone who had been involved in the construction of the fairground, who would have, reasonably been able to say, yes, I know where this fill came from. So we'd really need some more information before really getting into that. And if you do have any more information on that, we'd love to see it. But the aerial photos alone, they really only show that the area was filled, not where the fill came from. And I'll kind of reiterate from a previous discussion that we had, just because an area was filled does not mean it was hazardous materials placed in that area. Fill is typically referring to the soils or potentially, construction debris. But it's not, the same as when we're talking about the placement of electronics in the river around Bradford Island.
Yeah. And
Um,
on my end, to be clear, is the statement made to the lady that was down there had nothing to do with tripping and hazard or anything. That didn't come into play until after we did the public records request for that information. So I want to be clear on that, the statement made there was because the fill was contaminated. So that, but then again, that's hearsay. It was said there. This is what the lady tells us, but then in his statement, that email, he says, no, that's what I meant. But what he meant and what he said are clearly two different things. And so we do need to do some more research, and I've asked the county to give me any other information they know about that landfill, because but the answer that I've gotten so far is they probably don't have any of the records. So that seems to be an ongoing thing.
mhm. So I said a lot there. I know Rich had his hand up as well. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Rich.
Well, Megan, I think that you articulated it pretty well and in a much nicer manner than I was going to. I actually sent an email. I got some undeliverables for Jacobs, but I just sent an email with those attachments that were emailed from Mitch yesterday, I believe. And it is the correspondence between the Skamania County individual and his higher ups, as well as the aerial photos that are mentioned. Let's go a little bit down this rabbit hole, right? So let's say Northern Bonneville got demolished, and an Army Corps took all that material, and they said, look, Stevenson landfill, can we deposit it here? And Stevenson landfill said no, and they said, okay, well, we're going to put it in Hamilton landfill. Okay, that's a whole thing. Now you have what's remaining of that area of the Washington shoreline that they're then going to excavate in order to create a channel and create the second powerhouse, right? If that material, if that soil and soil, that's all it is really. If that soil was moved, just as Megan said, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was contaminated. So to conflate a Superfund site by saying, oh, well, anything that was removed from this site historically is contaminated to the point where it's, hazardous to the environment and the people. It's hard to kind of justify the amount of taxpayer resources that would go into investigating something like that. It's not like this is a Valley of the Drums, or that there was a known release of PCB oils in this area or something like that. It was dirt that was removed from one area, and by the way, in this whole conversation that we had, I looked at the final record of decision and the Federal Register. There were no PCBs at Hamilton Island. So that's why it was delisted. And I will share that with everybody in a minute. But to say, oh, well, now everything is suspect now. And it's really easy to go down that, to think like that. But we have to be able to focus on these areas that are really part of Bradford Island that we know are contaminated and that we are currently investigating. To say, well, let's go look at Stevenson because they built up this fairground area, which is not the landfill. Like, so you're talking about two separate areas right now. That's a hard thing to do, and I would encourage Washington Ecology to do that if there is the concern there from the community. I would encourage that. It's hard for us to do it because it's just it's not a historical release of contamination into the environment, which is what Superfund is there to do, right? Clean up historical dump sites, not necessarily track down every contaminant that may have or may not have originated from the national priorities listed site. So I'm sorry, Mitch. I'm not trying to shut you down. It's just you're conflating a lot of things here, and you're misrepresenting what was actually said in the emails. And yes, there was hearsay. This person said this to this person who said this to this person who said it to you. right? And then we have emails where where we got the actual person goes, I never said that. I have to I have to look at what's in black and white here. And it's hard for me to go, yeah, there very well could be some contaminated soil there. Even if it did happen to come from, what is now Cascades Island. So, and look, I really wish that this administration didn't shut down our environmental justice division, because I actually gave your information to them. And I said, look, he's got some real issues here. He's got some real concerns. We really need to, and you could do a FOIA request and I'll give you those emails that where I have given this to them and said, hey, can you do this? And then Trump got sworn in and he shut down the entire division. And so on behalf of EPA, I'm sorry to everybody that happened. But that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Not to get political, but at some point it had to happen, because the route that we were going in was not going to work. So anyhow, not to be political on it, but that's my side of that deal. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I think as well as I do, Rich, we had correspondence on some stuff and you were told to not meet or speak with me. I want to make that clear to everybody as well. And
no, I was told not to go and do a walkthrough of Hamilton Island with you.
Correct.
That's what I was told.
That's pretty much telling you not to.
No, that's not telling you not to speak with me. I have talked with you offline numerous times.
Not to meet with me on site.
Why
would that be said if you're supposed to be EPA? I'm a concerned citizen, not only that, but I'm a RAB member. And I said, hey, let's take a walk down there.
No.
And you agreed to it. And then you were told not to.
What my managers decide to do with my time, that's their prerogative. I have never been restricted from talking to you, Mitch. I'm talking to you now. I've talked to you numerous times on the phone, separate from the RAB meeting. I wasn't allowed to take a government-owned vehicle and drive it to Hamilton Island to walk around with you. That was the only restriction that was put on me. And my management and my team looked at Hamilton Island and all agreed there's no there. And I don't know how many times I actually have to say this. Like I will send all the information that I have to this entire group right now. As soon as I get off this, I'll send all this information. There's no there when it comes to Hamilton Island. So I was told not to go to Hamilton Island and walk around. That's what happened.
In the information you're sending out, because I had found a deal through, I think it was Ecology possibly, that was talking about the local water wells, private water wells, having contamination. Is that information in what you're sending us as well?
What local water wells?
It was a study that was done in that Hamilton Island area, North Bonneville, when there were some private wells still existing after Hamilton Island had been created, the landfill, and there was some study done through, I'm almost positive, I read it through Department of Ecology, that because of the water study, that leads me back to that's who did the study, but they had talked about contamination in some private water wells and wanting to shut them down and get the city back onto the city water system. So I'm just wondering, does that information, or do I need to keep digging and go back and relocate that thing? Because I'm terrible at keeping files, trust me. I'm not the best at keeping files, but I do remember reading it, and it kind of caught me off guard. And it might even be in that thesis that I sent to everybody. Maybe I'll go back through and read that 500 or 600 pages. It may have been in that. You know what? I think it was, the more I think about it. It's inside of that it talked about that groundwater contamination in that area and that. So I'll go back and read over that thesis again, and maybe this time I'll take my highlighter with me and highlight some things that are discussed about the material possibly going to the Stevenson landfill. But you say it didn't happen because you have a no, but I've never seen any documentation that says Skamania County said, we're not taking your waste. I've never seen any documentation whatsoever that states that. So, but I'll go back through and I'll read through that thesis again. And if any of you still have it, I mean, feel free to read through yourself, but I'm almost positive the more I think about it now, that's where I found that out was in there. So I'll go back and read it again.
So, I mean, there's a lot there, Mitch. If you want
Yeah,
to
there
share,
is.
if you want to share with me a study that was done on residential drinking wells, I'm happy to take a look at it. The thing is Hamilton Island landfill is nowhere near any residential properties, and it is right next to the river. So any groundwater contamination that might have occurred from Hamilton Island, which I'm not saying there is, I'm not saying there is. I'm saying that any of that would go to the river. It doesn't flow, like the groundwater regime doesn't go from Hamilton Island north up into Bonneville.
But it does. When they relocated the town, I knew people that had some of the houses that relocated there. And in the winter months, when the dam was opening and running wide open, their doors and windows wouldn't open and close as well, except in the summer, because that's when their houses were placed. So the groundwater intrusion pushes from the river back underneath that town. So it just does. That's how hydraulics work. So, but anyhow, like I said, I will definitely read back over that. And if I don't find it there, I'll spend the time to research back and maybe get back with ecology or somebody maybe that remembers somehow. But there is a study that was done, and I'm almost positive it was Department of Ecology did it. So, and that'll be interesting for everybody to see too, if I can actually get my hands back on that thing again. At the point when I read it, it was just like, wow, that's weird. And that's kind of left it at that, because there's so much going on here. I think that the public needs to know about more so than what we're being told. And that's all I got for today. We're at 7 o'clock anyhow, so.
All right. So we got a lot of information there. I'll just end on the topic of the fairgrounds and stuff. Having initially gone through what you provided, I really don't have enough information to respond to at this point. It seems we do have maybe some differences of opinions on, what's kind of said in the emails, what's meant, etc. But at this point, I don't have enough information coming out of those that gives me like some information to go look into at this point. So if there is further information that you have, there was kind of mention of FOIA request in the email. There was mention of potentially other aerials besides the fairground ones. And then there was also some discussion of documented like emails. Any of that you can provide, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I'm not really sure where to go with this topic. So that's kind of the information.
I'll keep digging. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mitch. All right. Let us go back up to 2 slides, please. Oh, excuse me, up to the discussion slide. So I know we're running over a little bit. I just want to quickly ask if there is any discussion points or questions from the public before we move towards adjourning. Okay. All right. Before I call for a motion to adjourn, I'll just put out for any members of the public, if you are not currently on our mailing list and would like to be, please feel free to stay online and we can work with you to make that happen. Or if you can't stay online or don't want to, there is an email in the bottom left of your screen right now, the Bradford Island public comment inbox at usace.army.mil. If you email that, we can add you to the mailing list. Okay, with that, we are at 7:02. Thank you everyone for all the discussion tonight and all the information you brought forward today. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Jennifer. Is there a second?
Kate,
I'll
Andrew,
second it. Mitch
I
Patton
hear
seconds.
I hear seconds from Mitch and Kate. Thank you very much. The meeting is now adjourned.